critical race theory is not a conspiracy theory, and it's not just something that happens in the US. It's here in Canada, in our classrooms, being taught to our children. Canadians need to know about this, and they must remain vigilant against this threat. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Now, you know that at True North, we focus a lot on the sort of woke left and the menace and the threat they pose to our society. They are radical. The things that they believe are they're fundamentally against the foundations of a free society. And there's so many problems that arise from that. Our own Sue Ann Levy, reporter with True North, has been on the front lines of reporting this issue in the various school districts. But today I wanted to take a step back and try to wrap our heads around what exactly this word means. It's sort of a buzzword, critical race theory. You hear about it a lot in the US, not so much in Canada, but it is very much here. It is very much present, and we see it in so many of the different strange policies that are coming out, specifically in Ontario, but frankly all across the country. So I'm very pleased today to be joined by Samuel Say. Samuel is a scholar and writer based in Brampton, Ontario. He founded the website slowtowrite.com and has covered numerous issues with biblical theory relating to race, culture, and politics. Samuel has been published on The Daily Wire, theblaze.com, The Christian Post, and many more. So Samuel, thank you so much for joining the Candice Malcolm Show. It's great to have you back.
Thank you for having me back again. I appreciate it.
So I know, we've had you on the show before, and there's a lot of different things that you write about, but I think the thing that you are most known for, the thing that I first learned about your writing and first read your work was on critical race theory. And so I'm hoping that you could just help us understand, because it's sort of a buzzword, it's sort of an academic word or phrase that many people just aren't really familiar with. So can you just, for someone who's never heard of it before, has no idea what it is, can you walk us through what this theory is and what it tries to do?
Yeah. Yeah. As you mentioned, some suggest that critical race theory is this conspiracy theory um, um, that the conservatives or the right are trying to use against the woke left, but it's not true. It really is a very popular ideology and philosophy within our culture. Essentially, if you've heard of things like white privilege, systemic racism, equity, those are all related to critical race theory. Essentially, critical race theory is originally from legal scholars in America. It was people like Derek Bell or Kimberly Crenshaw are the founders of critical race theory. It was started in the 70s as a reaction to the civil rights movement. Actually, they believed that the civil rights movement was not good enough. The civil rights movement, led by Martin Luther King Jr., taught on being impartial. It taught on, really affirming Western values of impartiality. And they say no, impartiality is actually an illusion. It's actually racist. So, which is why, for example, they oftentimes talk about colorblindness being a myth and really racism. So they really much hate colorblindness. Now, I will mention a quote from Ibrahim Kendi, who is
And sorry, when you say color blindness, you don't mean literal color blindness, right? You mean that in a metaphorical sense, correct?
course, yeah. I mean, yeah. So critical race theorists try to make it seem as if when we talk about being colorblind, that we're trying to say that no, we don't see color. Well, that's ridiculous, right? Of course, we see color. What we're saying is we're repeating what Martin Luther King Jr. believed, which is that we don't judge people based on their skin color, but on their character. But they hate that because they do believe that we should treat people based on their skin color. So Ibrahim Kendi, who, as I mentioned, is a leading scholar on critical race theory alongside Robin DiAngelo. He mentioned in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, that that racism is only wrong if it leads to inequity. But racism, or in his exact words, racial discrimination, is good if it leads to equity, right? And he says that past discrimination has to be met with present or future discrimination. These are his exact words from his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, which I call How to Be a Racist. So critical race theory really is teaching that discrimination against people, really against white people, to bring about equity, which is equity sounds like equality. And in the past, it was synonymous with equality. But within critical race theory, what it really means is equality of outcome between ethnic or racial groups. So now, just to kind of bring it all home, critical race theory basically is saying that Western society, America, Canada, is fundamentally designed by white supremacists for white people. And that because of that, it will always, and Derek Bell says this, that America will always be racist. It will always be oppressive towards black people, always. He says that the whole point of trying to be anti-racist is to try to minimize that. But that America as it stands, and by extension, Canada as it stands, our values are racist systemically and culturally. Therefore, in their minds, we need a revolution against these systems, to destroy these systems, to abolish the systems that we have, the prisons, the police, everything, in order for us to have a equitable or anti-racist society.
I mean, there's so many things you can say about this worldview. In some ways, it's devastating because if you buy into this theory, in so many schools, as we'll talk about, so many schools in the U.S. and Canada already have, and they teach in critical race theory today. I mean, if that's your view, that no matter what we do, and no matter how hard we try, and no matter how tolerant we become of one another, how much we learn from one another, how much we try to improve and constantly strive, right? The beauty of what Martin Luther King taught was that he believed that the American ideals were just and righteous, and that we needed to work harder to live up to those ideals, and that those were the ideals that he wanted us all to share in together, U.S. and Canada by extension. Whereas the way that these people view the world, it's like it doesn't matter what we do. We're all racist, and the idea is that we have to start again. And it's like, well, what is that going to look like, right? Like when it comes to equity, Samuel, I didn't really know what they were talking about at first, because when I think of equity, I think of the value of your home or something like that, like a financial term. But they're talking about equity as opposed to equality, and they had these like handy little picture graphics, and we can throw one up on the screen, and it's like so simplistic. It's like, oh wow, okay, equality is like these two kids on a ladder, one's tall so they can't see over the fence, and the other one, all we have to do is give that second kid a taller ladder. And it's like, they make it seem like it's so simple, right? All we have to do is just provide these taller ladders for these kids. But it's like, that's not a real solution. Like what you're actually talking about, your point is equality of outcome. So someone in micromanaging every aspect of our life to say, like, it doesn't matter if you're not as hardworking, or not as competent, or not as capable, or not as intelligent. We don't want everyone to have equal outcome, and that's starting to feel a lot more like communism. So I just wonder, like, what is it that critical race theorists are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's really as simple as you said. It's communism. When the graphic you mentioned, which I'm sure we'll talk about this, but it's actually being shared across kids as early as kindergarten. That graphics that you mentioned in Ontario.
Well, it looks like it's designed for kids, right? It's a cartoony, kid friendly. Whenever I see it on social media, and they share it all the time, people on the left, it's like, it's so simple. It's like, oh yeah, don't we all just want to live in a world where everyone can see over the fence, right?
Exactly, exactly. But it really is, as you said, that it's really communism. Equity, the way to understand it, is really borrowed from the Marxist concept of of equality of outcome for all people. And in fact, when we hear the word woke, which is associated with critical race theory, it's really a modern version of class consciousness. To be woke is that the oppressed has become conscious of their oppression. That's really what it means to be woke. And so critical race theory, what they do want is they believe that all non-white people are oppressed. Therefore, they want to make all non-white people woke or conscious to their oppression, and then to advocate to changing all the systems, these good systems that I, as an immigrant, left my country with my mom to come to Canada to be privileged in these good systems, capitalist, free, impartial systems that we have in Canada. They want to abolish all of that so that in their mind, people like me can become, a beneficiary of discriminating against white people and taking some of their, their wealth and things like that they've been accumulating themselves, and give it to me as some evil form of justice in their mind.
Well, I mean, it's like it's again, it's hard to wrap your head around what they actually want, because, like you say, the end outcome looks pretty nefarious. And to your point, people do move from all over the world to come to Canada because they see it as a free and fair society. I remember during the George Floyd riots, Samuel, we saw a lot of articles in Canada talking kind of almost like trying to, it's like they had like envy, like they looking at the US system where there is police brutality and there is a lot of disparity between some Black communities in the mainstream. And it was like the Canadians were trying to show how bad things were here too. And I remember seeing some articles, talking about how Black people fared in Canada. And I remember looking at the data myself, thinking like, this is actually amazing. Like I think it's 50%, 56% of the Black population in Canada are first generation immigrants, meaning that they themselves or their parents chose Canada. How bad of a place can Canada actually be if all these people are choosing to come here? And then even of that, when you looked at the incomes, relative to other immigrants, relative to the Canadian average, it was like, these communities are doing pretty good. We should be happy about that. Obviously, we should strive to make sure that everyone has opportunities, but it's just sort of, to me, what they're teaching, fundamentally what they're teaching is to little Black children out there, that no matter how hard they try, no matter how smart they are, no matter how intelligent they are, how hard they work, they're never going to be successful. And then they're teaching little white kids that there's something wrong with them, that they're inherently oppressive, and that their society is evil, and that like, it's like no one can benefit from this. It's such a poisonous thing to teach to little kids. I wonder how did this creep into our schools, Samuel? Where did this come from, and what can parents do when they hear about this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So it's so the in I've done some, of course, research on this stuff, and critical race theory has been part of Canada's school system, at least at the university or college level, since the 90s. I mean, a lot of the top, even to this day, but since from the 90s, a lot of the top law schools in Canada have been teaching critical race theory for some time. So even though critical race theory just became part of the Canadian, I guess, consciousness over the last 5 years or so, it's been around for a long time. And it wasn't really till the Black Lives Matter riots, not last year actually, but in 2015, 2014, with Michael Brown and Ferguson, that you started seeing a huge push in America and in Canada for critical race theory at a mainstream level, for children as early as kindergarten. Um, so it's been around for a long time, and and it's usually police brutality, or at least accusations of police brutality, that leads to these ideas becoming more accepted. But for parents, one of the things they need to do, and I've seen many of this happening, is that parents just need to call their schools, call their local school boards, and just ask them about the curriculum. They will be shocked that the vast majority of schools in Canada, and I really do mean Canada, I don't just mean Ontario, I mean Canada as a whole, are teaching critical race theory. I've had parents reaching out to me from every single province in this country, saying that they've asked their school what is being taught to the children, and some of them will deny it, but in their words, it's pretty obvious they're teaching critical race theory, including Christian schools or Catholic schools. So if even these schools be teaching critical race theory, you can only imagine what is being taught to your children at public schools.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, Jordan Peterson sort of advising parents in one of his videos, like, tell your kids that if they hear the teacher talk about things like white privilege, your child should get up and walk out of the classroom. That was what he advised. And I don't know if parents are doing that now, but we've got a bunch of examples of CRT in schools. So Ottawa is debating whether or not to ban the singing of "O Canada" in schools because they say it's oppressive. Lord of the Flies, the book, was removed from schools in Ottawa. An anti-Black agenda, and I put that in quotations because this is the thing that these people do. They call themselves anti-racist, they call themselves anti-Black, and then if you oppose them, it's like, well, then you must be racist and you must be anti-Black because they're anti-Black racist. But that's what their agenda is. They're being pushed in Hamilton, and then we saw the crazy story of weighted voting. I don't know if you saw this out in Halton, where depending on your skin color, your vote is worth more on school boards. I think this is the kind of thing that parents would just be kind of outraged. Oh, another one. Someone sent me this the other day because I've got a little baby, and someone sent me that there's a book out called "The Anti-Racist Baby" by Ibram X. Kendi, and I flipped through it. It's interesting because it's a #1 New York Times bestseller. I'm sort of trying to indoctrinate babies, read this to little kids about how they live in a racist world. But I did like how the ratings, the Google review ratings of this book is 13% of people like this. So even though, it's the New York Times talk of the town bestseller, when it comes to actual parents reading this kind of stuff, being like, why would I read this to my baby? Like, it's so wild.
I have that book, and I bought that book in particular because it really. So I mentioned Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Well, that's the kids version of that, and that book, I kid you not, is being read across all Ontario to kindergarten students. So, and again, and this is all I've received internal documents from teachers in Peel and in Toronto who are telling me this, that they're being compelled to read that book, which is teaching especially white kids that they are racist and they need to accept this and then be an ally with black people or non-white people.
So it's wild. So, do you think this idea is popular? Because so many of the people I see pushing this, to be completely honest, are not black people. You know, it's white people. It's sort of the white guilt kind of thing that people feel like this is what they must do. It's the latest trendy iteration of leftist ideology. Do you think this idea resonates? The idea that people who aren't white need to be woke and fight back against the system, and then also in the US, this has become a huge issue. It's become a public debate. And yes, a lot of people say it's a Republican conspiracy theory, but we've actually seen states ban the teaching in the US. Do you think there's anything like that coming in Canada? Do you think there's any political leader or any political movement out there to say, hey, we don't want this stuff at our schools in Canada either?
Unfortunately, no, I don't see that at all because so I've said this actually, and it shocks many people, but critical race theory is just as popular here as it is or as it is in America, if not more popular. The reason why I say it's more popular is because in the US, you actually have some pushback against it. Over here, we don't have a lot at all. I know you guys have been fighting against it. I know that some conservatives are against it, but the mainstream conservative movement here is not fighting against it at all. In fact, I know some politicians, some of the conservative politicians have pushed critical race theory and have been saying some of these ideas on social media and on their platforms. So unfortunately, I don't see any of that happen. I would be very glad to see that, but it would be a huge shock to me. So that's yeah. So it's unfortunate in that case, but I don't see that changing.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of this is happening in Ontario, which is currently run by a progressive conservative government. But what about the idea that this is sort of designed to, the class consciousness and awaken people of other races to sort of what revolt against the system? Do you think that that's having an impact? Do you think that it's, it's sort of designed to tempt? You wrote this once that critical race theory is a sinful ideology that can tempt people like me, people who reject critical race theory to sin. So it's designed to tempt people like you. Do you think it's working? Do you think that it is a lot of new Canadians or people who aren't white that buy into this ideology and that it guides them?
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier about the first generation Canadians. It's not tempting them at all. But the second generation Canadians are absolutely being tempted by it. I know most of my friends have embraced critical race theory. It's influencing how they view other Canadians, no doubt about it. There was a poll last year that said that 54% of Canadians believe that Canada is systemically racist. That's actually the same number as it is in America. So that includes, of course, Black Canadians, immigrant Canadians, and white Canadians. Now, the most vocal people for critical race theory in America and Canada happens to be white women, and that's because I think a lot of white women are influenced by Robin DiAngelo, who is a white woman who is next to Ibram Kendi, the biggest voice on critical race theory right now. But also, white guilt tends to be very appealing to white women who feel basically bad about being white and believe that well they can become um, they can be seen as the better white people if they would just be an advocate for black people. But really it's just pride, it's just arrogance, it's just virtue signaling, and they're not really considering what they're really saying. Many of them are becoming more racist against their parents, but they're not really understanding that they're really being racist. They just think that they're being anti-racist.
Well, and we've seen this so often that so often the most racist people are the sort of woke leftist white people who preach about it. I mean, someone like Justin Trudeau who talks a good game about diversity, and then in his own private life he likes to, paint his face black and go out and celebrate that way. Like, when you're talking about the white women, I don't know if you ever saw this. I think it was in the New York Times. There was a story about how these women would organize like really expensive dinner parties, and they'd hire one of these ladies to come and give a seminar, basically where they could like air their racist thoughts and learn about how they're actually racist. And there's one woman who was actually an adopted parent, and she had adopted a child who was black. And the whole idea was that even though she has her own black child, that is racist. It is racist to adopt someone from a different race and to love them as a child. Which, it's like, how far have we gone in this ideology where everything is about race? Like that's all that matters. Nothing else matters. Your character, your qualities, how you live your life, how you act in the world, your day to day, virtues. None of it matters. The only thing that matters is your skin color, which to me seems like racist. It seems regressive, and I think that's how I would describe this whole movement.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think our society, we've suggested that racism or being anti-racist is the most important thing you can be in this world. Therefore, that means that they're telling people that the best way for them to feel good about themselves is to be anti-racist, which includes lying to themselves about being racist when they're not. The vast majority of all these people are not, at least traditionally, racist. They become racist by embracing critical race theory and anti-racism, but originally they weren't. And that's a scary thing. I've been seeing, if I told you the number of people who've called me an Uncle Tom or a coon, and mostly from white people, you'd be shocked by it. It's almost a daily occurrence on social media and sometimes in person. But I'm a big guy, so that's rare. People don't say that to me in person, but for the most part, it's online, and it's mostly coming from white people, and it's quite shocking. It's stopped being shocking now, but it's alarming when white people are telling me in racist terms how much they love black people more than I do. But that's what critical race theory is doing.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It's despicable, and I mean, I can say that I've seen it too, online, and in the other way. All these men who claim to be feminists and claim to want more women empowered. As soon as they don't agree with you, they're more than happy to call you really disgusting names and denigrate you. Well, I feel like one of the things that conservatives need to do to fight against critical race theory is come up with our own kind of narrative, like this idea that no, Canada isn't an irredeemably racist country. Yes, we've had our own history, we've had ups and downs, there have been bad actors and good actors, and bad initiatives and good initiatives. But at the end of the day, we should celebrate what we have in common, the things we've done right, and strive to be better. So what do you think that conservatives, and just not even conservatives per se, but just people who reject this sort of racist obsession that is going on, race exception with critical race theory, what do you think that we can do to fight back against this dangerous trend? And what do you think a better narrative that we can be telling little kids about our society would be?
A big part is what you already referenced, which is this. My tribe. I'm Fanti in Ghana, and we were many of my distant relatives were taken as slaves, including people who have my last name. Um, I saw a slave ship with people with my last name say on it, and these would be my distant relatives. So they were taken over by force over the Atlantic into the New World. I see that, and then I see me many years ago, willingly, happily, with my mom flying over the Atlantic to come to this great country, and that's a gap of 200 years where not people Africans were being forced out of their homes into this new world and then over the Atlantic, and now we are willingly, very glad to leave everything we love and in our original nations to come to Canada. That's what's happened, and critical race theory is trying to destroy that. Is trying to say that no, Canada is still racist. Canada has always been racist, and Canada will always be racist, and that's wrong. That is destroying peace between people in our nation, and that's not good. Canada talks about how diverse we are. Well, this diversity is going to be destroyed if we embrace critical race theory, which is teaching us that, well, Canada is always going to be racist, and therefore we need to be discriminating against white people.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better myself. That was so eloquent, and you're right. They try to erase 200 years of progress and say that we're just as bad as it was back then today. Well, Samuel, say thank you so much for joining the show. It's really helpful, really clear to help to have you break everything down for us. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show.